Good evening and welcome to the Kim B. Davis Show. I'm your host, Kim B. Davis, and it is December 2022. We are a few days away from the beginning of 2023. And this evening, we're going to be talking about reflections. We have one of our favorite guests on. We have Dr. Angela Celeste May. We know her as our organizational and our clinical and our forensically trained psychologist. She is also the president and co-founder of A.M. and Associates. She is the president and founder of Celeste Productions, Inc. She is the immediate past president of the Michigan Psychological Association Foundation Board. She is also a trustee of the Michigan Health Council. She is also a board member of the Drug-Free Youth in Detroit Advisory Board. And all of that, she is an author and a musician. Good evening, Dr. Angie, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kim. Good evening. How are you?
I'm good. Happy holidays to you and your family.
Thank you. It's been a wonderful holiday season. I have to say, so much to be thankful for. So.
Absolutely. All right, so Dr. Angie, without further ado, let's talk about reflecting on 2022. Share with us your reflections on 2022.
Well, you know what? In thinking about today's show with you and knowing that we were going to do that review, looking over the past year, something that really stood out to me, and I don't know if this is unique to this year, but I think we have some stark examples of in 2022, and that is this, yin yang, the balance of the two sides of very challenging things, and at the same time, not only looking at, I'm a glass half full type of lady.
Absolutely.
So, we're practical. We say it like it is. My husband calls me the hard people because we're gonna tell it like it is. But I also am the sunshiny person, right? So I love to look at, the possibilities and the positives. So not only looking over this past year, 2022, I not only noticed that, there's, as with every year, there's the bad, the good, the challenges, the growth, but I really noticed that in every situation, I'm one to try to encourage people, or to encourage people to look for the growth opportunities, as we've talked about, even in the most challenging circumstances. But there are several that I thought really showed both the work that we still have to do and the resilience. So, for example, thinking about our first Black woman Supreme Court Justice.
Yes, excellent.
Justice
Excellent.
Brown Jackson, absolutely. And I was thinking of that as one example where, it was such a wonderful celebration of her to even be nominated. And as many people said, even on the, not even on both sides of the aisle in terms of our politics, the partisan sides, people agreed that she was one of several. There were quite a few Black women who would be fantastic in this role, who are like prepared. So, we're celebrating that she was one of them, celebrating that President Biden followed through with what he said that he would do, which is to nominate, a Black woman to the Supreme Court. But then at the same time, what she had to go through, as we've talked about earlier, in the year, it wasn't that she was grilled to really make sure that she was, the right one. It was the insulting tone. It was the vitriol. It was the unnecessary personal attacks that were thrown at her, which showed, and then how she came out of it, how she handled herself and came through that, and the strength and all those things that we had talked about. That was one situation in 2022 that showed both the challenges and the racism we still are struggling through, and the rising to the occasion, and really her having to deal with that, which we're sorry that she had to. It showed her value even more, shone even brighter. And I just found that throughout 2022, those kinds of situations that were challenging at the same time really showed what we can do, what we can accomplish. I think that's kind of like I don't know, we could brand 2022 with that. I think about in China, in the more recent news,
Mm-hmm.
seeing particularly these young people protesting, and there was a lot of focus on protesting, specifically what has been described as going overboard with their lockdowns
Mm-hmm.
for COVID, dealing with COVID, so much so that they just felt, absolutely imprisoned almost.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it wasn't just that they were pushing back against that. First of all, they had to go through that, and then that they were in a lot of ways really risking their lives and well-being and pushing back against that. But that their government actually, not, we won't say caved, but responded. They actually
Mm-hmm.
did respond. They did,
Mm-hmm.
loosen that a little bit. So I just think that 2022, including in our country again, the midterms that we just had, it just showed over and over again how in the face of our feeling that our voices, we meaning just people, feeling our
Mm-hmm.
voices are being somehow people are trying to mute our voices or tamp us down or whatever the case. And then just over and over again, this rising up, this resilience, this making change in spite of it, making change maybe because of it. So I think that there's a lot to celebrate in 2022 as reminders that every one of us has a voice, as we've talked about before,
Mm-hmm.
having our voice, that we do have a voice, that we can exercise it, and that it can and does make a difference. So those are some of my reflections for this.
And I think you're right on point with that. I would just add, because there were a couple of photos that I saw, and the picture that people use to describe our newest Supreme Court Justice, Ketanji Brown. Is it Brown Jackson or Jackson Brown? I forget.
Brown Jackson, I do believe.
Brown Jackson, excuse me. So people were saying they were using the young lady who she had to walk so that she could run. I forget the way the saying went, but it was showing historical figures throughout history who prepared our Supreme Court justice to take this seat. And it is important because we do have an African-American woman who is the Vice President of the United States. So she's the second highest power in our nation. Yet we also saw in our midterms, and it's so important that you brought that up, women rising to the top in terms of elected offices, running campaigns, and just making sure that their voices were heard. I saw more women getting organized and active and engaged in pushing the message. You got to get to the polls. Yes. You got to get to the polls. And there's a picture that I saw and it stuck with me. And I believe it was in Haiti, but it was someplace. There's a mother. So there are police officers that are trying to arrest her son for something. I don't know what it was. She had a machete in her hand and she was holding it to the neck of the police officer and she had her other hand on her child. And I thought, here is a Black woman, an African-American or an African woman, wherever she was, Caribbean, and she is fighting for the life of her son. And in this country, every day there's a video of young Black people, older Black people, Black women, Black men being harassed and harangued by police. And it's not just to say that, when we walk down the street, everybody's just after us, because it does feel like that, because there are so many videos. But we have people who, as people have said, the rise of the Karens, where people are questioning, why are you here? And what are you doing? And what, who told you could be here, or whatever it is. And you have these people who are fighting, who are some are harassed, some are killed, some are arrested, all different kinds of things. But we saw voices coming to the forefront. And I saw a lot of different ethnic groups coming forward. You know, in Ukraine, we have the Ukrainian and the Russian war. And, you know, for those of us who weren't really paying attention to geopolitics, we were like, well, where is Ukraine? What is that? What are we talking about now? You know, and some of us had to tell people like, okay, well, you know, it's a country, blah, you know, all this and that. But you saw, you know, the president, Zelensky, who was just here in Congress, asking for freedom and saying, please come help us. And other people on one side who were angry and upset saying, well, why should we help you? And I thought, but you don't help the people that are even here. So why are we even talking to you? We'll just move on and let's go to other people. And then, like you said, in China, the lockdown for COVID was so strict. They were telling people, you stay home. You come out of your house, we're gonna kill you. Like you this is serious. Like you can't sit there and get mad like we do in America. Oh, we have rights. You can't tell me to stay at home. I'll cough on you, and if I want to. Not in China, you will not. You will be in big trouble. But again, we saw people stepping up, and like you said, it was young people who said, this isn't what we want to see. This isn't what we want to do. So I do think it's the rise of voices that haven't been heard before. Even on this type of a platform, you have podcasts from all different types of people who are rising to the top, sharing opinions and thoughts, and having discussions about issues and topics that people never talked about before. Absolutely. And people,
not publicly.
Right. And now people are joining that conversation, and issues that we thought were only American, or issues that we thought were only something that happened on the European or the African or the Australian continent, all of a sudden make more sense to us. And we're like, oh, well, we have that issue here. Well, what do you do? Oh, well, this is what we do. Well, let's have a conversation and see if maybe what you guys do would help us over here. So it's interesting to see that exchange of ideas positively, because we know there's a lot of negativity, but there's a lot of positivity. And so I think that it's very important.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I want to go back to just for a second what you were saying about women. We saw it in such a large degree in the last midterms we had in 2019 in our country, and then again. And I think that all of that, including what we're seeing in, like you're saying, these other places around the world, in China, we influence each other.
Yes, we do.
And that's one of the reasons that President Putin and other similarly authoritarian leaning leaders try so hard to shut down those images and then that information of what some of their other fellow humans are doing in other countries. It fuels ideas. It lets people know that such things are possible. And we haven't even talked about what's going on with women and taking off their head coverings.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. I mean, we're seeing it, this pushback in so many different incarnations, in so many different, cultures. But what they have in common is these are, Americans should understand, and those of us who have the privilege of living in relative freedom, these are huge risks. These are, like you said, even in China, a pushback or stepping out of line can really get you in a lot of trouble. That's the case for a lot of these places. But still, they're, as with Ukraine and others, they're really taking that step and fighting and pushing back to make change, positive change for themselves. But I wanted to go back to what you were saying about Black women voting, at least in our country. That's old. I mean, it's not, it's not new, but finally, the boots on the ground, the organizing that Black women have done for decades, back before our 1960s civil rights, finally getting again that to the forefront, getting that attention and that recognition. And when you have it all the way up to the White House to recognize, as he said, as our president said shortly after or on his way to becoming our president, he said, Black people and Black women, put me here, which is true. We, as a, you know, as a voting block.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like you said, in terms of the organization and all those faces and voices and hands working behind the scenes that don't get the glory, you know, and don't get the attention. And maybe they didn't necessarily, at least in times past, they may not have been running for office themselves, but they, you know, these were the people that put these people in office.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it is, it's just so wonderful to see the, it's so important and wonderful to see these women and men and these folks getting that recognition, so that one of the reasons it's so important is it goes against that narrative that, well, you know, I can't make a difference, or we don't make a difference, and we're always, you know, we, whatever group that we may be, women, Black folks, whatever, and seeing how much muscle and power really is behind pushing things forward.
That's right.
I know it just, it speaks to us, and it lifts us up, and it also speaks to the generations that come behind us. Also, yeah.
And you're absolutely right, because I want to add this, and I just read this about a month ago. Afghanistan has told every girl and young woman in Afghanistan, you are not allowed to go to school. They have stopped it.
Yes.
And so here we are fighting for reproductive rights and other issues that we're concerned about. And we have women in another country who experienced freedom and opportunities for almost 20 years, if not. And now this generation has to deal with and try to reconcile. Do we go back to the past, or are we going to move forward into the future? So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in Afghanistan, because you're right. There are lots of traditional, very conservative countries where women are told you have to be covered. You are not allowed to drive. You are not allowed to work. You are not allowed to be educated beyond a certain point. And they are not taking that anymore. And they have decided that it's not working for us. And so here in America, where we have the right to vote, we have the right to stand up and say, you know what? I don't like that you said that. I think we're going to remove you from office. And, you know, no one takes you away to jail or anything like that. Those are blessings that we have here in this country. And so it is great to see.
And won.
Yes.
And we have to continue to fight.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We must always remember where we came from so we can understand where we are going.
Absolutely. And how close, you know, I was just going to say also, I keep thinking about my husband and I are, you know, we're big Pistons fans. Well, we support all of our Detroit teams, but we're love watching the Pistons. And we just had this painful loss 2 days ago. Oh, it was so painful. It was.
They lost in overtime. I saw it, and I was just like,
oh my goodness. But, and I keep thinking about them as this metaphor for what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But as painful as it was, I was saying, you know, it was a good and important lesson for this young team to learn.
Yeah.
Because they're playing well. But the psychological part, we know that's a big part of, right, athleticism, and, you know, the things that we do, that they got too comfortable.
They did.
When they were, what was it, 3 minutes? 3 minutes.
And all of a sudden it flips. Right. Yeah.
Flip. And they had gotten a wide margin, you know, a pretty good, was it 14, whatever it was. And it was a good lesson that, you know, it's not done until the final bell, until it's final. So they were like winning, 3 minutes left, and bam, went into overtime, and then
totally lost it, and then they gave up.
You're right. It was like, we got this in the bag. It's like you can enjoy a little bit, but
you got to keep working. You got to keep working. You got to keep working.
That reminds me of the metaphor for lots of places, but definitely our country. And the president that we just had, whom many of us didn't call him president, and I was one of them.
I was too.
Yeah, we just named the number, which number was. That the people say flirting with, but I submit he's dead serious. He sees no problem with what you were saying, you know, carting people away and arresting the enemy, my competitors, because I don't like, and all of that, and not just him as a single individual, but those who rally behind him, some of whom are still there in our legislature. As with our young Pistons team, we have to stay mindful, and that's what President Obama would talk about, and still talks about when he's out on the campaign trail. This is a day-to-day active democracy in a republic like ours. It's a day-to-day active thing. It's an alive thing. It's not going to just like keep itself. You can lose it so quickly. And we've come closer, I think, than a lot of people. Not a lot of people, but it surprised a lot of folks. I'll put it that way. It surprised a lot of folks.
Yes.
When you're born and you grow up, and this is our country, and
this is how it is, and you're like, oh,
we watch other people's elections to make sure they're doing it right. We don't have those concerns, we submit, and we our ballot, and we don't worry about that. But yes. Yeah, not worry, but we have to be vigilant about it.
No, I think worry is the best word. I do, because January 6th happened, and here in Michigan, in Detroit, we had people arguing and fighting to have the election stopped, to have votes thrown out, saying that the entire city voted fraudulently. We had other states that held up their voting process because they believe that people were doing things illegally. You had voting personnel, the actual staff, people that are elected, people that run the election in that state were physically threatened. In Atlanta, they were like, we'll kill you. Not, I'm going to come, not that this is right. I'm going to come and throw eggs at your car because I don't like what you did. No, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to hurt everyone in your family. In Michigan, we had a plot to kidnap the sitting governor, where they had plans to her summer home. So when we talk about voices, we heard a lot of voices rising. There was a lot of noise and a lot of chatter, and people had to be really careful in how you pulled and disseminated information from that. And it is great because, as we said, the positive voices, the voices that we're going to rise above this. Don't listen to these people. They're just talking down here. We're up here. These are the things that we want you to focus on. And those were the issues that voters were concerned about. We talked about pocketbook issues, but people were really concerned about reproductive access. And in a country where we're still having this conversation, with all the technology we have, all the money we have, all the programs, this everything, and we still have a high mortality rate for Black women when they give birth to children, is a sin and a shame.
I've heard that a long time. I grew up with it. It's a sin and a shame.
It's a sin and a shame.
It is a sin and a shame. And you're so right that the rising of voices is voices on all different sides. And some things that were, I won't say, some of these thoughts and ideas and statements some are newer than others. A lot of it's not new that it exists in the world or in the minds of some people, but what had been unleashed by a previous leader in this country who basically represented a normalizing of this kind of negative vitriol and insults and all the rest. Just really helped a lot of people feel that, again, that voice is coming to the forefront, that it's not only okay, but it's proper, and I should just open my mouth and say whatever I think I want to say to whomever. So we had the rise of the Karens and, and all of that. And like you said, January 6th, which did happen. So again, and those things continue, not the January 6th, but that type of negative, disrespectful public, displays of ridiculousness continue into 2022. But 2022 also, in review, represented, like you said, pushback against some of those things. which included accountability.
Yes.
So I just want to put my arms around the scholarship of the January 6th committee in our country that did not shy away, did not veer away from shining the light, digging down, investigating, and getting answers about what was really behind that, who did what. And to, as they did this week, was it this week?
That I think it was last week. They came down with the verdict. Yeah. Or
Yeah,
not the verdict, but the decision that they need to prosecute.
Right. And then submitted released their report
Mm-hmm.
for all of us to read. So again, it's that, for every, maybe not for every point by point, but for those who are spewing the negativity and, like you said, the violence. As psychologists, we talk about verbal violence, and it's not always about putting your hand. Of course, when we talk about abuse, and we talk about the emotional abuse, physical, etc., it's not. There's physical abuse that's horrendous and devastating and traumatic, but also verbal abuse and emotional abuse. All of those things are very, very detrimental to individuals who have to have that coming at them. So this is very much the vitriol and the way that some people, not all, that have found that they have the freedom, that they think that they're free to just say whatever and police people that are none of their business in negative ways. Those are abusive acts, and they have an impact. So again, in 2022, sadly, we're seeing, it didn't start this year, but we are seeing a greater rise in some suicides that are going on.
Yes, we have.
We have seen more of that. Research has shown that if a person, particularly a child, but if a person knows someone, witnesses something or knows someone in their life who commits suicide, who takes one's own life, that it's something like 50%, at 50% greater risk.
Wow.
It's a huge jump. And different stats will show different percentages, but that's that 50% percentage, it is out there in some of the research that shows it's that big a jump in incidents from those who experience, who witnesses it or know someone. So it's a very worrying and concerning thing. And it's like it's magnified because again, the technology is great, it's wonderful, we can share information, but at the same time, and we can lean on each other as well. Share, like, from around the world, like you were saying, sharing ideas, and I've gone through this, what are you doing that helps? That's a wonderful strength, that's a wonderful thing. But unfortunately also, that globalness of our society also means that when those things occur, all of us are exposed to that as hate to say it, as a possibility, as an option. And so that feeds on itself, and that's part, I would say that is part of why we're seeing unfortunately more of that. But I also want to add this too. There's I do not want to sound insensitive, but I will say, and I've heard people say this in different ways in terms of the help that community offers. A lot of times we know this, certainly with COVID in the last few years, we know that greater isolation has contributed to some of that also, for sure. Depression, anxiety, like we've talked about. And so there's a great benefit to the interaction, increasing positive interaction. But I'll also say this, and this is why I said I don't want to sound insensitive, but I know when I was growing up, if I felt down in my family, my mom, my grandma, and my dad too, they would say, when you're feeling down, they would sit you down and ask, okay, what's going on? They would do that. But they would also say, when you're feeling down, there's nothing that will pick you up like doing something for somebody else.
Yes, I've heard that as well. That was said to me too.
Yeah. And I think that people don't intend to. I am, I am in the field of psychology, but I've said this before, but I'm not one to say that therapy is the answer to all that is out there. Therapy is valuable. It's a wonderful tool. It can do so much in so many situations. Absolutely. But as I've also said, that there are a lot of things that are therapeutic as well, that can be healing. And so I think that there's the isolation part, but then within that, there's also, and I just know stuff's gonna come at me. There's a selfish thing going on too. And it's not intended. I don't think people mean that, but mean to be selfish. But and it is for any of us. There is that mental downward spiral of what I'm lacking and I'm in pain, and it's real pain. But the word that comes before each of those like thoughts is I. I'm in pain and I'm suffering, and and there's other ways, of course, like this is so bad, and it may really be. It may really be. So the selfish part is not that I'm not suggesting that people not attend to their own pain, because we should, absolutely should. What do I need? But I think that again, that pendulum shift. We talk about, for example, women, Black women in particular, but women traditionally in many of our societies, including here in America, have given so much that we leave ourselves off the list.
Yes, we do.
And how much have we talked about? Don't do that. Put yourself on the list. Make yourself a priority. Take care of ourselves. That's so important. It is important. But at the same time, again, there is a kind of balance where it can become so much me. Doesn't mean you're not taking care of others, but me and how I'm suffering, that we don't talk about the healing aspects of while you're working on your stuff, give, or while you're, or as an actual treatment, so to speak, to get up and get out and take that pain. I think about my mom. I've talked about my mom, but she's amazing. Like, people just fell like madly in love with her, and they literally just met her 30 seconds ago. That was my mom, madly in love. And a big part of it was she had a lot of pain growing up. She had a lot of pain and difficulty and issues that she had to struggle with. She took that and used it to love on other people. I mean, she had a mission. She was blessed in many ways growing up as a kid. She also had a lot of painful issues growing up as a kid. She made it just her mission that, she was going to see about the kids of the world. And of course, the kids of the world, because some of those kids were 88. Some of those kids, she was a lover of people. But I mean, she's such an example. And, we could name others who take their pain. And you have to be taught this or learn it, or, we have to cultivate that. But to take that and see how you can use it to give. And it's amazing how that heals ourselves. And I really am concerned that that's a message that's getting lost.
I agree.
As we try to help people who are seeking to harm themselves because they don't see any other way out. So yeah, I think that that's something that we need to consider, not consider. That's too genteel, was it? See, I can hear my family saying, just be yourself, Angela.
Yeah, be yourself, be yourself.
Be myself. Not consider. We need to take that into 2023.
Yeah.
To keep ourselves on that priority list. And then add to that, figuring out ways to give that it's not either or. That we keep ourselves on that priority, but at the same time, one of adding to seeking therapy and counseling and community and all those important things, but also just see who you can reach out to in those moments that will come, because they come for all of us.
Yes, they do.
There's times to just be off by yourself, and that's important. And there's also times to just reach out, and sometimes doing it and when we're in our most pain can be so healing to us as well as to other people. So
You bring up a great point, Dr. Angie. And I didn't even plan to talk about this, but I'm so happy that you brought it up because, and I often wonder this as well. So the gentleman that was on Ellen DeGeneres, Twitch, who killed himself, I didn't know who he was. And I'll be very honest, I've never watched the Ellen DeGeneres show. Never watched the Ellen DeGeneres show. And people looked at me, you never watched? I said, I didn't. And I'm sorry that I never saw him on there, but the videos that I saw that people were posting of him, I said, wow, he was a great dancer. He loved music. He seemed like he was happy. And one of the things that I would love for people to do is to stop assuming that everybody is happy because you see them smiling. Everyone is struggling with something. And like you talked about your mom, just taking her pain and giving to others. My wish for 2023 is that people would take a moment and care about somebody else. Whoever it is, even if it's just one person. There's how many billion people on the planet? If we all just said, okay, turn to your neighbor, like they tell you in church or at school, turn to your neighbor and tell your neighbor, I love you. Now turn to your other neighbor and say, I love you. If we could just do that, people would be okay. People would have someone to talk to. They'd have somebody to turn to where they wouldn't feel so alone, where they wouldn't feel like, whatever it is, and I understand because I've been deeply depressed and we've talked about this, and I felt at times, I know that I'm not the only one in this situation, but this is my situation. And I just need the pain to stop. And for me, I had great friends and I had family that helped to pull me out of that. I don't know that this gentleman had that. And I said on another show, I wish that one of us, this was a radio show that I'm a part of, and I said, I wish that one of us could have said a word to him and spoken to him about the love of God. And maybe that could have had a difference. But I want to go back to, because you're right, the message is getting lost. Because one of the things that we hear in 2022, we had so many mass shootings. Every other day there was a mass shooting. And one of the things that I have learned from mass shootings and suicides is that a lot of times people will say, especially young people, I want to be famous. I'm like, you want to be famous and shoot up a school? But I'll live on. Everybody will know who I am. And so I just have to let that hang for a minute. We are in the age of social media, the internet. So children see it. Oh, well, if I shoot up a school and kill some people I don't like, it's no big deal because I will be famous. And I wonder, because I do agree, I think you're right, that message is getting lost. And so when people take their lives and we do, quote unquote, celebrate the life of someone on social media, we've made them famous. Not that Twitch wasn't famous, and this isn't anything against him, but I'm using this as an example where you are right. So if somebody is going through something, they say, well, see, they'll love on him after he's gone. That's what they'll do for me.
Yes, that is that's such an important point. The messages, not only the messages that are getting lost, but the messages that are, to your point, the messages that we're giving these young people. And oh gosh, fame above all else. Why is it so important, particularly for young people? Their identity is still developing.
Yes.
So that whole "who am I?" feeling lost, some of that's just part of the navigation process. But the answers that they're being given by, some of those who are older than them, even if they mean well, is it too much tied to material? Is it too much tied to, fame, like you were talking about? I was part of a podcast recently, and I brought up, we talked about it, I think, at the time that it happened. Was it Miss USA or Miss America, that the Black young lady who was just Miss USA, I think, a couple years ago, and she killed herself?
Oh, she killed herself, yes, because of the pressures of fame, and everybody said, but she was Miss USA. She was beautiful, but she was struggling. I believe it was in a relationship. She wasn't sure about this man or something. There was something personal going on, and she wasn't really sharing. And she had done the same thing. She'd gone out with friends and family, had a really great time. They had all these great videos, and then she jumped
Yes.
off of a building.
And prior to her jumping, she had just posted a video about taking care of her mental health
Yep.
and
Mm-hmm.
all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I mentioned her because I don't recall hearing about the personal relationship.
I don't
Because I think
remember, but that's what I thought. Don't quote me on that.
okay,
Don't quote me.
okay. Well, I know they were as we do with it. You know, whenever this happens, I think one of the most painful things for those left behind is, the whys.
Mm-hmm.
What could it have been, particularly when you feel you don't have answers for someone like her, who, like you say, and Twitch, who seems that they have everything going for them. But the last that I had heard about it, because I hadn't gone back to like learn more, I remember it was her parents actually talking about, and it was others as well. They talked about everything you just said. She's beautiful and accomplished, very smart and all of that. And what stuck out to me though was what she had on her plate coming up. And she had all of these things lined up that she was getting ready to do. And this podcast that I was just on, was it a week ago, week and a half ago, it was before Christmas, just before Christmas. And actually it was with my cousin. It was a family affair. My cousin is a minister in North Carolina.
Okay.
On my dad's side, Mark May. And so he has a new podcast that he's doing. And so he had my sister on, my licensed counselor, myself, and our cousin Deshawn, who's the LPC. So it was a very interesting conversation. And it was talking about something we don't hear that much about, which is mental health and ministry. Very interesting conversation. But so it was during that discussion where, suicide and those things did come up, even stepping away from ministry, just, what people are struggling with, that I mentioned her because what jumped out at me was the thing that everyone else was seeing as all to live for, not all of it, but particularly that schedule of her, oh, she's got this going on. What jumped out to me was that's a lot of pressure.
Where does she rest? Where does she take care of herself?
And where does she have permission?
Yes.
We grow. There's a reason that it's not that only young people are doing this, of course, but we know we're seeing a plethora of younger folks doing it. Whereas we know at times that when we struggled, when we were younger, it seemed like it was never going to get better. And there's one thing that maturity and time often teaches us is that it will get better. There will be some kind of change at some point, whether you grow into whatever it is. And so some of that is developmental stuff in which we need to surround all of us, regardless of the age, but definitely the younger folks who are still figuring this out. And to them, it seems so finite, like this is how it will always be. Like you said, you had family and friends, I had, family around me, people or ministers, whomever, to tell you this. We need to take that message into 2023 also, to have an answer. Not that there's one size fits all, but part of the answer is to remind people, in addition, like you said, reaching out, checking on each other. You definitely brought in the love of Jesus Christ. Absolutely. There is a hole, HOLE, there's a hole inside that can only be filled with spiritual growth.
That's right.
And you don't have to be ordained you can talk about, your own personal experience with spirituality. People like folks kill me. People like to say, well, I'm not really, and I understand people have been hurt by certain churches for sure. No one's perfect. Humans have done stuff that has damaged people's faith. I can understand that. But a lot of times people will say, I hear less of it now, but people will still say, I'm not so much religious as I am spiritual. And I do understand that. I think spirituality is a part of humanity, regardless of if you follow a particular religion or not. But I get a little tickled sometimes when I hear people say, well, you know, I just follow Christ, but I'm not particularly religious. I'm like, Christ was a committed Jewish man.
Yes, he was.
Yes, committed
Yes.
to the
And he
synagogue.
he believed in religion. However, it's not the way that humans like to say, you know, he believed in going to church or going to the tabernacle.
Synagogue,
Oh,
right, the tabernacle.
yes,
That's right.
yes,
Yeah,
yes. He
yeah,
believed
but
in.
yeah,
Mhm.
yes,
There was
yeah,
organization around it, and he believed in that. He talked about some of the hypocrisy where, okay,
absolutely.
you folks in up here all saved, and you down here looking at, well, who are you?
Right. That is not the church. That's
That
not
is
what
not the
he, yeah,
church.
yeah,
Right,
exactly.
right.
Exactly. So, you know, we all have more learning to do. There's more growth, but you have to stay around. You got to stay around here to learn and grow for sure.
You do.
But again, with that balance, sadly in 2022, we have seen some escalation in that. But we've also seen now it's a thing, right? We see it all in social media. Check on somebody.
Yes.
You know, check on, don't assume. So there is again
a positive that comes out of that.
Positive, yes. The things that we used to say as psychologists, social workers, counselors, you know, to each other or to within conferences to our clients, people are in the lay public are saying it now, which is excellent. And that's what we want to see. That is what we want to see. So,
and that is important. Okay, so Dr. Angie, our time is quickly leaving us. Tell us why it's important to reflect.
It is important to reflect. Well, partly, I know it's a cliche, but as people say, you know, how do you know where you're going to go, where you're going if you don't know where you come from? But it is true. It's important to reflect to see your own growth, to see your own growth, so that you can celebrate that growth, and so that you can. It helps you fight against any tendency or any lie that you haven't made a move, that you haven't moved anywhere. So reflecting helps us see our growth, see where we've come from, so that we can celebrate it and so that we can build on it for going to our next level. Because life is about nothing if not, you know, ongoing growth. So reflecting is really, really important for that. It's also important it is to look at our mistakes. Don't be afraid to look at your mistakes, because that's how we grow. That is
exactly.
So look at our mistakes, learn from them, and really use reflection. It can be used in a lot of different ways. Use reflection to ask some questions as you go into the new year, as you go into the next quarter or the next phase or whatever. Why did I do that? Why did I do that? Oh, that's right. So reflecting helps you to remind yourself, oh, that's right. You know what? I've got to remember next time, whatever. So it helps us to celebrate. Reflecting does. It helps us to learn. Reflecting does. It helps us to continue to grow. Reflecting does. It helps us to hopefully not keep making the same mistakes. Or if we do keep making the same mistakes, learn more about why we do.
Exactly.
So it helps us to learn, helps us to grow, helps us to celebrate. And hopefully helps us to embrace some good things too.
Excellent. What is your hope for 2023, Dr. Angie?
My hope for 2023, I want to add to what you said about your hope for 2023. My hope for 2023 is that we continue to grow, not only as individuals around the world, but as groups, and within our own country, within our various cultures, as women, as Black people, as men, you know, that we continue to grow in a positive way. And be more specific, my hope for 2023, my prayer and hope is that the truth regain.
Yes.
It has never lost its power. It has never lost its strength, but that it regain its popularity.
I agree. Yes.
That it regain its popularity. And
yes.
that's around the world, because this whole misinformation is international, the pain that caused, you know, also known as lies.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So my hope is that we continue to grow, and that part of that growth is that truth regain its popularity and its prominence, and that people not succumb to greed for power over truth. That truth and love, real love, what it really looks like, have the prominence that perhaps the Lord Almighty wants it to have in our lives.
That is a wonderful way to end our podcast. Thank you, Dr. Angie, for being with us all throughout 2022 and giving us wonderful information and helping us to think about different topics in different ways. Now, tell us everything you have going on, where we can find you, how we can reach you, and what you have coming up next.
Thank you for asking. If I may, I am going to, because you're so kind, you always ask me to be sure to talk about my book. So I want to officially end with a quote from my book that's at the very end of my book. So this is my book, Freedom. The full title is Freedom: What is the Experience of Living Without Negative Self-Imposed Limitations? It was my master's thesis. My doctorate dissertation was actually about diversity and its importance in the work world. And so we'll talk about that later too. I talk about this because it was published as a book, but anyway, so this is I wanted to do research for my master's thesis on resilience. So I interviewed folks from different backgrounds, different ages, men and women, and there were 7 key themes that came out of the research. And so the themes had to do with how you go from feeling stuck in your life in some way. And that speaks to what we're talking about as far as not feeling that you can climb out of depression. We're talking about that in terms of suicide rates, right? So this book, do pick it up on Amazon as well as exlibris.com. So yeah, those 7 themes, they seem to be fairly universal for how we can get from feeling stuck in our lives in some way, relationships, work, career, whatever the case, and get to a point of feeling free, some freedom around that. And that has to do with how we define ourselves. It has to do with self-esteem. It has to do with those things. So the quote that I wanted to end this on is, I ended it by talking about the value of the research and why I wanted to do this. And so the last couple of statements at the very end says, ultimately, it is for the good of society at large that I became interested in doing this research. I found that people had become so stuck in their ways of seeing the world and their place in it that they could not seem to escape, even when they wanted to. The creativity of many individuals has become so stifled that they cannot even imagine a new and different way of living, let alone try to put it into motion. Most importantly, this study is meant to remind us that we have the capacity and the right to choose for ourselves what it is that we want, with whom, and how we want to be whenever we grow up.
Wow, that is powerful, Dr. Angie. That's amazing.
And I've said this before, but my mom always said that I was like, a little old lady, but I was a true kid, a true baby of the family. But I was gifted with a lot of wisdom young. Listen to everything my grandma said and everything. And I wrote this when I was in my 20s, but the Lord just blessed that. So yes, that we have the right, we have the capacity. That's what we want to remember. So yes, so this book is out there, Freedom: What is the Experience of Living Without Negative Self-Imposed Limitations? You can get your copy. It's in a Kindle as well, paperback and hardback from Amazon.com. What else do I have coming up? Okay, well, first of all, you can find me on all the social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. My company, A.M. May and Associates Incorporated, with my sister Michelle Ann May. You can see the title at the bottom there, A.M. May and Associates. She and I, we do counseling, consulting, and coaching in our company. So you can find us on Facebook. You can also go to ammayassociates.com to see some things that we have coming up. For coaching, we do personal and professional coaching. We also do, I do doctoral coaching if you're considering working on your doctorate or if you're already in your doctorate program. And even though my background is in psychology, I have helped many people in all kinds of different fields with their doctorate work. So, and particularly those working on qualitative research too. So you can find me to do coaching with that. Consulting I do for both nonprofit and for-profit companies. So yes, find us on all of the different socials. On YouTube, I have a channel as well, primarily dedicated to talking about music related stuff, as I am a professional musician, president of Celeste Productions. I teach voice and piano here in Detroit at Marygrove Conservancy, but I also do music lessons virtually as well. So again, like I said, you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Notice I didn't mention Twitter. I do still have a Twitter, but I don't use it that often. And we're gonna see.
We will.
So you can find me either at Angela Celeste May, CELESTEMAY, or Dr. Angela Celeste May. So I'm at those various ones. Music wise, at www.reverbnation.com/Angela Celeste May. That's where a lot of my music stuff is located. And you can find, I have 2 CDs that are out. The latest one is Reintroducing the Lady, and you can find that on Amazon as well as on Reverb Nation. And my first CD is No Limits, so you can purchase that from Reverb Nation as well. You can get the different singles or the whole thing. What do I have coming up? Okay, so let's start with the psychology side. I still am a college professor at Wayne County Community College District. So there's that teaching there in their psychology program. With my sister, we have a retreat. My sister's mainly annual retreat for creative folks. And for creators, we mean music, dance, authors, all kinds of things. But it's a wonderful opportunity to reflect and reset and get ready for your planning out for the things that you would like to do in 2023. So go to our Facebook page, go to my page or my sister's, Michelle Ann May on Facebook, and you can see the information to click to sign up for that retreat. It's in January and it's virtual. So we got that coming up. I've got some performances coming up, one in March and one a little bit later in the summertime. I don't have the dates yet, but if you're in this area, if you're in the Detroit area, I will be performing at the Congregation. It's a well-known place here in Detroit, so I'll be doing that in March, which is we celebrate Women's History Month. So like I said, I don't have a date yet, but it's one of the Saturdays in March. So hopefully I will have the date in January.
Yay!
I've mentioned that I'm writing new music, which I am. I haven't started recording yet, but that's some of the stuff. I've got going on. My 2 students, I've got 2 at the moment, one in piano, one in voice. They just did a performance in December. They did a wonderful job. Very proud of them. So yeah, that's some stuff I've got going on at the moment.
And that is a lot, Dr. Angie. So thank you for joining us on the Kim B. Davis Show and being here throughout 2022. We can't wait to jump back into the conversation with you in 2023. So thank you again.
Thank you. And thank you. I want to thank you for inviting my sister and I on your inaugural, I think it was your inaugural podcast, and inviting me to come back. I enjoy talking with you. You're a fantastic interviewer. You ask such wonderful questions. And I think you're a closet psychologist. That's what I think. Because you're so wonderful at like asking questions and just open up a whole, to just discuss. So always rich, insightful conversation. So I am honored to be a part. Thank you for inviting me back.
Well, thank you. I received that, and I'm so thankful and grateful that you are the expert, and that what my thoughts I can say now, Dr. Angie, am I way off base or not? And then you can clear it up and give us the right answer. So no, thank you very much, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you and your family. And to our listening audience, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year and Happy Holidays, whether you celebrate Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever it is that you celebrate or don't celebrate. We just wish you a wonderful time with family, friends, and rest, and whatever it is that you enjoy doing. You know me, I'm the host, I am Kim B. Davis. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and I am on Twitter, Snapchat, TikTok, LinkedIn, everywhere on social media. You can see this show at youtube.com/Kimberly Batchelor Davis. And Batchelor is spelled Batchelor. You can hear this show on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Google, and Wisdom. You can learn more about me at kimbdavis.com. Thank you again for tuning in. Thank you for being a part of our family and listening and engaging with us. And we look forward to bringing you a new slate of shows in 2023. And always remember, be magnificent. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.